Okay, on with the frame build, and first we have to have a fiddle around with the tank. That's how the tank sits in the frame. It's pretty cool, being rotated round so that all the fuel can congregate at the bottom. Nice, easy, accessible outlet for the tank. The plug for the tank is interesting, secured by not one but two M3 bolts there as a compression plug. It's a very nicely moulded bit of machinery. It's quite tough plastic, feels like polythene on there. It's got 4 holes in it, one for the clunk and the fuel tube. Now the fuel clunk tube comes with a heli, the clunk doesn't. They recommend a fuel magnet. There's a moulded right angle for the vent, and you have to supply a bit of your own fuel tubing to go on there, 44mm long, cut to shape. There's a couple of other ports there, one for refueling and one if you run a YS is intended for pressure release. So that just slips in very, very easily into the tank. Nice little touch. There's a little moulded recess there for the vent. We're not going to put that in completely yet. I didn't use a fuel magnet on there. I'm just going to use a heavy clunk for now, and it seems to roll around. It's quite long, the clunk is in there, but it seems to fold around on itself, so I'm sure Kasama has worked that out. On the one hand, the clunk's got to be long enough to get into the bottom hand corner, on the other hand it's got to be flexible enough to go down, but you can have a play with that yourself and decide what you're going to do. Once you've got your internal plumbing done, just line up the 2 bolts on the line of the moulding flash there, and then you can just do up the 2 M2.5 bolts there. Now we start assembling up the right hand frame today, so we need bag 5 for that, which has got a couple of subsidiary boxes, bags in there, bag 5.1 and bag 5.2, and we're now on page 11 of the manual. So we'll get our bags out, which is our frame, and our tank mounting damper, and then assorted hardware in bags 5.1 and 5.3. Start with the easy stuff and put the mounting rubbers in the tank cutout, and also there's a very nicely thought out wiring hole there that's got a little rubber flash to go around the inside so we don't cut through our wires. The edges of the carbon are actually pretty they're pretty rounded off, not too sharp at all, but wouldn't do any harm to do Bob's trick and run over the edges with some wet and dry if you think you might be running some cables or fuel tubing over the edges. We're going to assemble the right side of the frame first, but I'll put the 2 together just so you can see the differences with the frames. They're almost identical. It's just that the canopy mount and brace system on the inside has got a lip for a rubber ring, a rubber O-ring for a damper. Basically, we've got this moulded frame spacer here. It's got 2 canopy mounts on there. It's got 2 E-clips that we put down the middle, and then we can thread on these plastic spacers. These have got recesses in one side which locate with the E-clips to stop them ringing round. So we'll put those on either side. They've also got a little lip on the outside which engages with the O-ring, and the simplest way to pop the O-rings in is just to push them down into the alloy spacers down there. Got it. Now we can take our right side of the frame. When you put the tank dampers in, the Kasama label goes on the outside. I'm not sure if that's important, but that's what he says, so we best do it. And then this frame spacer and canopy mount can just simply push through there, and you can see how that goes. That's an elegant little system. Now we do have one slight fly in the ointment, unfortunately, and this is a packing error that Kasama has already discovered and is taking steps to remedy. But we've got 2 canopy standoffs here where we should have 2 frame member cross pieces. They should be drilled M3 either end, obviously for the M3 bolts. Now, as luck would have it, I've actually got some quick UK header tank standoffs. These are 22.25 mil, so I'm going to use these for the build until I get the right parts from Kasama, so we don't hold up the video series. The show must go on. So we'll ignore the canopy standoffs in bag 5.1 and go on to these other interesting bits, which are servo mounts. Got a few bits and pieces to fix onto the frame sides. This is the right hand frame side with the Kasama logo pointing out on the frame rubber. First off, we've got this little elevator bearing block, which is just a CNC mounting with a flange bearing stuck in the rear. The bearing points towards the back, and that's fixed into these two little holes above the tank damper down here, with the bearing facing backwards, and we use two M2.5 by 6 bolts to do that, so we'll fix that in now. Carrying on putting fittings onto the right frame side. The two canopy frame cross members go one just in front of the tank down there, and one just behind the wiring portal just down here at the top of this square. These are both secured by M3 bolts. As I said before, we don't have the proper Kasama cross members, but I'm using these Quick UK standoffs here padded out with an M3 washer, which makes exactly 22mm with an M3 at each end. So they'll do for now until I get the real things, and I might even keep them on there. Next, we've got this funny contraption here, which is called a Cyclic Servo GV extension mount. And I can't figure out what that's for yet looking at the manual, but anyway, it goes down here secured with these two bolts down here, M3 by 6mm bolts. This is the moulding. It's got a prong towards the front and it's got a recess at the top, and it's got a little CF plate to secure down there with one M3 bolt. There is another bolt that secures this when the left frame goes on later, so I'm not going to Loctite this one just yet until I figure out what's going on there. And that's the right frame finished for now. Okay, it's time to start fitting the frames together. This is a really exciting bit. Now this is pretty cool how Kasama's done this. I thought that there'd probably be bolts going through the CF into threaded inserts in the alloy frame, but none of that. We don't have these holes in the center chassis mount aren't threaded. They're just drilled out to take an M3 by 32 bolt, and that's really cool because it means that basically you won't get these threads stripped out if you have a crash, or if you do it up too tight, and you don't have to replace that center engine mount if you launch the threads. So that's really cool. So we're going to put a 32mm bolt. There's two mounts, two at the back and two at the front down here. So we'll just assemble that up and put a couple of bolts in the front and the back. See. Right, we can assemble our frames now onto the central mount using 4 M3 by 32 sleeve bolts. Two things we've got to do, which I forgot to do on the first dry assembly, is to put our cross member in the front, and also to put our tank in, because it's going to be a lot easier to put it in now than later, and take the plug out of the tank because it goes in a lot easier that way. I have to mount up the tank by pushing it through. I found the best way to do this was push it from the outside to the inside, and it's just a bit of a struggle to get these three mouldings through the rubber there, but anyway, it went in. Maybe a bit of washing up liquid or a bit of saliva might help. Alright, now we put our canopy mount and spacer in at the front, we've put our tank in at the back. Now we're ready to lift it onto the frames and get it the right way round. Pop it over the frames and put our 4 M3 by 32 bolts, 2 at the front, 2 at the back. When mounting your frames together, the easiest way is to put your tank in the middle, put your front canopy mounts and damper system in the front, and then just drop the lot down onto the main chassis mount in the middle. Now we need to put in a frame spacer there, little aluminium frame spacer there that goes into this curious GV mount. It's got a little machined recess that goes into the hole, and then we've got an M3x15 bolt which we can lock tight up and pop down through the spacer into this curious mount. And then you've just got two M8 bolts, M3x8mm bolts remaining, which go into the frame cross members, the two that we've just put in previously. And then that's your frames together. Exciting.